Hello everyone. Welcome to our panel on the transformative power of collective memory. Why is memory work important? As you know, memory work and practices of facing challenging past practices and spaces of memory are becoming more and more important. Maybe we need to start by asking the question, is it enough to remember only or not to forget? Remembering is a form of resistance against time, against forgetting, and memory work resists against forgetting and make remembering collective for coexistence, equality, peace, and justice. Hrant Dink came up with a recommendation in one of his articles. He said those who still defend forgetting are those who are not afraid of the past, but who they are afraid of the future. So based on this, we need to say that memory work has many other functions other than making people remember certain things. Work in this field make the information taken away from people accessible, and it provides an alternative discourse and help us understand things better, ask questions that we haven't asked before. And it also further encourages dialogue, empathy, and mutual understanding. And it creates a space for communication and contact. Memory work is also related to search for justice and truth. Many of the truth spaces and justice spaces in the world are also venues for activism. Past is in the past. Let's open a new page. Start from here. Look at the future. This type of an understanding is still defended by some people, especially the politicians. However, the thing is, when we forget memory work or spaces of memory, the past still continues to shape today, and we are not able to shape the future based on our past learnings. And all the studies show us that opening a new page is not about forgetting, but it's about remembering and facing. So, in this session, we have very distinguished guests working in the field of memory. They are really inspiring all of us, and we will talk about the today of memory work, the opportunities brought by memory work, importance of archives, and the relation with arts. So we will be discussing all these questions. And I would like to start with a general question. Well, we all have a concern, maybe a wound that we want to find a remedy for. So according to you, memory work and places of memory, what kind of opportunities do they bring for us? What kind of contribution they can make for finding remedies for the past wounds, and how can we have a transformative approach? Hello, everyone, and thank you. Nayat, well, you actually made a very nice introduction. Memory is very useful because it helps us come to terms with the past. This way, we do not forget about the past through memory work, through archives. We don't forget about the past, and we should not forget about the past. Only if we can come to terms with the past, we can heal, and for that we have to face the past. Some painful and traumatic experiences have to be confronted with. So if we can do that, and if we can get healed through this, then we can say that we are in peace with the past, and we have a more confident stance against the future, and we can become a healthier society. All this can be possible through memory work, and apart from the official history, if we can create the alternative discourse, the discourse that gives us the facts and truth, only if we can transform and convey it to future, for the work of the historians and researchers. And if we can give young people an opportunity to understand the past, then countries like Turkey, who had traumatic experiences in their past, who are not able to talk about the past, and who have problems with their pasts, then we can say that memory work can become a very positive thing. That's why it's very important. First of all, I also would like to thank you for your invitation. What we can say is that in countries like Turkey, where there is a very deep-rooted state tradition, which also is full of pain and sorrows, as the state is not facing with anything, in countries like this, memory work is in a way trying to fill in a gap. This is an important effort, an important initiative. I wish we had a mechanism that was functioning better, but through memory work we are able to archive certain things, and all the reality of the past, even though it's disturbing, even though it's disclosing the sins and crimes of the state, it's very important to reveal these. And just like Nayat said, I also would like to join her in saying that people who are born into that trauma because of their family past made more efforts to become a part of the memory work. However, now, in our country, things have changed so much that children, the new generation, are born into the trauma. That's why there is now a platform that they feel they belong to in the memory work. I don't know if it is necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. We can discuss this. But memory work, both nationally and internationally, is really filling an important gap, as I said. Okay, thank you. This is my first panel after I arrived from New York, and I'm very happy to be here. Let me continue from what the previous speakers have said. I think the question is very important. Can memory work provide a remedy for the future? As a person who has been working in this field for a long time, I don't think that the work itself alone provides a remedy, but it provides open ways to find a remedy. What do I mean by this? Of course, in many fields we have valuable work carried out in Turkey, especially, just like Aylin mentioned, for healing the wounds of past remedies. Many painful events have happened in this country, for instance. Most of us maybe came here in the morning walking. Just imagine how many places of memory you have walked by this morning. I walked here from Gümüşsuyu. I passed through at least 5-6 places of memory. Taksim Square, for instance, Kazancı Hill, Gezi Park, Istanbul Radio, the City Theater. On my way to this venue, there were so many places of memory, and many different segments of the society pass through different resistance activities in those places. So those in power are trying to stop certain struggles, but these places were places of struggles. So it's not only about healing the wounds or establishing transitional justice, but these places also are important and effective spaces and venues for making a connection with the past. We can maybe call it memory activism. Although they don't present the remedy itself to us, they really help us find what the remedy is. I have a presentation. Can you please bring my slide on the screen, because I have a quote to share with you. So I will take you back to 1945. Of course, since then we've made great progress. However, I would like to quote the words of writer Sebald. Can we have the presentation on the screen, please? Next slide. Sebald says, after 1945, as an answer to what literature should be, he's from Germany. During Adenauer times, he says, memory work is about forgetting the past. So, even now when I try to remember, the darkness doesn't lift, but becomes yet heavier, as I think how little we can hold in mind, how everything is constantly lapsing into oblivion with every extinguished life. I think this quote is very important. It's very, very emotional. So he goes on to say how the world is, as it were, draining itself in that the history of countless pieces and objects which themselves have no power of memory is never heard, never described, or never passed on, he says. Sebald. Of course, since 1945, we made great progress. However, the practices of violence that we had in the past brought along policies of forgetting. And these policies are not only destroying people, buildings, and places, as Nazlı Temirberyan has said in her most recent work, they also restructure the everyday life in that building space or person, and they prevent the transfer of memory from one generation to another. This rupture, in a way, also prevents social healing. When memory is healed and it cannot be transferred from one generation to another, it's very difficult to continue working on this. I don't know if there is a remedy for this, but I would like to talk about how we can connect it with art through some inspiring examples. However, the starting point might be actually pointing out these ruptures, actually putting a name to these ruptures. And memory shall not be confined to linear time. We shouldn't say that past is past, we should forget, let's look at the future. No, instead of this, what we call as memory rupture would only continue if we do this, because the past is never in the past. It's very important to look into past, and as much as what we remember, how we remember it is also important. And let me stop here. Okay, so the relation between art and memory, maybe we can also discuss that because you have work in this field. Because participation, counter monuments, collective commemoration forms are becoming more and more important, and we see that there is a lot of inspiring and innovative work carried out here. So I'll ask you, anyone inspiring you in the most recent years that you loved and that make a contribution to collective memory building? What are the works of art that you would like to share with us? Okay, I can't use this. I don't know how it's working. So I have chosen examples from 3 different countries, but as I work in the field of art, I would like to present you some concepts first. One is the concept of poiesis. Aristotle, in his process of experimenting the world, this is what he uses to understanding the world after praxis. Then we have communitas. So we have communitas, which is all about coming together for a purpose, to create structures that don't exist, to make a contribution to the transformation of the society based on the needs of that society. So it's about creating communitas. So poesis is also a process including communitas. I chose 3 examples, 3 countries with a violent past. One is Cambodia. You see Anchon Pond on this slide. The Red Khmer's regime, after the Red Khmer's regime in Cambodia, first, the Pol Pot regime that was in power had these child soldiers, army. He was a part of that army. Somehow he was able to escape that violent atmosphere. He was adopted by an American family, and Anchon Pond finds himself in US, and life is not easy in US anyway for him because he's a Cambodian. Maybe you would remember in the Cambodian regime, the intellectuals, religious leaders, artists, and civil servants were targeted, and his family were the managers of the national charity company, an opera group. So he lost his parents during the regime, Pol Pot regime. However, this opera tradition and Cambodian music, he started a work to revive these. He tried to perform traditional Cambodian music and transfer the musical memory to new generations. Cambodian Living Arts was established by him to reach out to young people. So you can actually search for it, Cambodian Living Arts. They are giving scholarships, training programs, workshops, and Khmer Magic Bus is another initiative that they have. They are reaching out to the remotest villages of Cambodia. So this collective memory, a musical memory that was lost, is now brought back to our day, and they transfer the traditional music, Cambodian traditional music, to young people. So actually he was able to build that link that was broken.
The second example is from Argentina, a photographer, Marcelo Brodsky. His project is titled Good Memory. He was born in Argentina in 1954. After the military coup in 1976, he migrates to Spain, and during the coup, he loses his brother and his closest friend. He goes to Barcelona. About 20 years later, he shows the courage to go back to Argentina, and he starts going through his family photos from the past, and he finds one of this photo here. He's at the 8th grade at middle school. He's with friends. He finds his friends in this photo one by one, and he actually takes their photos again. And as you can imagine, there are friends that he cannot reach because there is this dirty war in Argentina, and they lost most of these people during the war. Brodsky already has an existing communitas, his high school friends. He revives them. He talks to the school administration and suggests starting an exhibition. His school is a very important school, Colegio Nacional in Argentina, and the class of 1968, whoever is left from that year gets together. So they actually remember the names of those and celebrate them so they're not lost anymore. And for the new generation, they transfer those who were categorized as lost. Doris Salcedo, or Salcedo from Colombia, is my final example. Colombia is a country that is woven with violence both in the past and now. Salcedo has associational works of art, but I believe in the context of our topic, the most inspiring work is in a square, the Plaza de Bolívar square of Colombia. So there is the Justice building, the City Council building in the square. In one night, Plaza de Bolívar hosts 20,000 candles by Salcedo. She tries to do that with 20 assistants. It's in fact an impossible project. There's no existing communitas here, but there is an ongoing violence, so it's a mourning invitation for this violence. And in 2007, in order to pressure the Colombian government, there is an organization called FARC, and they're actually having this action to criticize some political wrongdoing. So Salcedo says the following. As an artist, she criticized her own role. I don't think art can solve problems. I can't do anything for these families or victims. And when we talk about art that is trying to address these political issues, we need to face the fact that art doesn't have the capability of being a savior, but it has the capability of demonstrating them. So by mourning, there is the creation of a spontaneous communitas by Salcedo. It's very impressive, and in fact, it is a work that includes this participation notion, so I hope there will be further examples of this kind. Nevin Hanım. In 2005, there were some clashes in Diyarbakır. There was this collapse in Sur, so there was this destruction of a whole city. And unfortunately, the new generations will face a completely different Sur because it is not there anymore. I visited it recently, and I'm thinking I was lucky I had the chance to see the previous state of Sur. I experienced that feeling and that history, but unfortunately, a lot of people who haven't seen Sur, they won't know anything. But you actually exerted great efforts to fight against that. You worked through archives. So in order to transfer the memory of Sur to future generations, in order to shed light to that memory, in order to demonstrate what was lived there, that multicultural life, you published a book, you held an art exhibition, you have different projects and events, and it's not easy to do any of this. So it's really worth all kinds of appreciation. At this point, I would like to talk about archives, because in collective work, a beginning point that is usually disregarded is archives, but everything starts with the archives. So what kind of work did you carry out, in those tough conditions? There are rights violations that are still going on. You continue under these circumstances. So what is the feeling behind that? Yes, our trauma or our near trauma is Sur. The trauma never ends, but Sur is indeed very live for all the people of Diyarbakır. It's an ongoing trauma. Of course, it started in 2015 October, and the clash continued until March 2016. There was destruction, there was reconstruction, but it was impossible. We call it the destruction of cities, because Sur is a city, it is the heart of Diyarbakır, it's the historic site. That was the case for Nusaybin and Cizre and Şırnak. So there are tens of historical cities that are destroyed. Why is it a massacre, because we have understood later that everything was planned through one center. First it was criminalized, and then the cities were destroyed and they were turned into flat fields. And these are historic cities too. So they were turned into flat fields, they were brought down. They said we do infrastructural work, and they also killed the layers below the cities. So they made reconstruction impossible through new construction. So they actually deleted the collective memory, or they tried to do so. They tried to do this through this area. So it's a serious traumatic wound. Did they just kill that site? No, they also killed the human life there. For one thing, it's a living area, so people were forced to migrate, thousands of people, and they embezzled their property. They lost their property overnight, these people. And they lost everything, and they need to go elsewhere and try to build a new life under very tough circumstances. And on the other hand, yes, let's talk about Sur. It wasn't just those venues that were lost. It was also the collective memory, the social memory, that was a serious problem. Of course, Sur, Diyarbakır Fort, and Efsal Gardens are World Heritage. I used to be a museum worker, and this city needs an archive. It's a historic city. We couldn't find data, and we were planning work around that, but it would never happen. And recently in the municipality, we initiated this work with Osman Kavala. We decided to do something, but as soon as that started, there was this trustee that came, and so we decided to do it with an NGO after the trustee. And as of June 2018, in the digital environment, we have the Diyarbakır City Archive. We call it Diyarbakır City Archive, but of course we focused on Sur. Of course, we try to document what we've lost, we try to compile the data, and we focused on creating new documents because we lost something very important. You had this emotion when you visited. We always have this emotion. I know Sur, but then the people after me, the children, won't know about it. There is this lack of identity, lack of infrastructure in Sur now. So the Sur culture, Diyarbakır culture, it has nothing to do with that, this artificial city that they created. And in fact, this city imposes the idea that this is what Diyarbakır is on children. So those children who don't know about the past of the city will think that this is what the city is all about. This will weaken their sense of belonging for the future. But these structures and cities without identity will evolve the culture and life to something different, so that architectural design will turn the society into something else. But this is at the same time a serious violation of human rights, and it's also a bloody destruction that we've experienced. So the archive work that we started in 2018 doesn't exist. I mean, we said we have to do this after Sur, we said. It's very difficult because the trauma goes on, the pressure goes on. Quote unquote, the urban transformation, in fact, keeps destroying the city. After Sur, there were two neighborhoods where there was no clash, and they did the same there. And there was this Ferit Köşk neighborhood. They are doing the same there. And there is Bağlar. They started to do the same there. They did this in Benusan. So it's all across the city. There is this destruction and rebuilding and, you know, confiscating the property of people, kicking them out of that area. So they're trying to create a new society through this location in a way. So it just creates a trauma. It just actually exacerbates the existing pain, and it actually adds further layers on social wounds. It's still very difficult to speak for two reasons. One, the pressure that the power creates. in fact, it's not just those in power, but all those that create the violence. They create this pressure that prevents you from speaking. And the trauma still goes on. People are not comfortable to speak. Last year, there was a program to support rights, and the women in Sur, you know, in their new lives, what did they experience after this destruction? We wanted to talk to them, to document them. So our colleague who conducted the study, her psychology was devastated because every conversation ended with a crying fit because it's all very fresh. So retelling this was creating a problem, and for the person who listened, it was also difficult. But we realized we had to do this because, and we are glad we did this. Why? The people that we talked to had a lot of difficulty talking. They cried, but they kept on talking. We wanted to interrupt, but they said, no, I want to tell this because it healed them to talk about it, they said. So that work led to this result. And memory is something that you forget over time. It doesn't stay the same because human is not a computer. Human memory is not a computer. You change the story, you transform it, emotions are involved. A lot of things affect the memory and it transforms it. So that's why we wanted to hear the truth when it's so fresh, just to know what people actually went through. So that's what we're doing. In order to record this memory, we are creating the city archive. This is our main project, coming to your question. So our main project is the archive. But to support the archive, we do other work to obtain data to enrich this archive. So we look at the near term, and Diyarbakır, and this is true for Turkey in general, but Diyarbakır is like a summary. There is this violence-based, trauma-based experience all the time, and looking into that, documenting that is what we want to do. So we really do care about this, and in doing this, we want to document what is true. It shouldn't be a misleading archive. We should get the true data so that the situation can be seen from the real perspective in the future. So we just take it without processing it. We just take it as it is and transfer it to the future. That is our mission. So this is what we're trying to create. We also have this book. We distribute it in the booth. We have the oral history work that is going on. And this year, in 2015, we're going to work with children and teens. They used to be children back then, and now they are teenagers. So we're doing the same work with them because we saw that it was children and women who were most affected by this. So we want to get their perspective, and we want to record what went on from their perspective. So we have a website called Diyarbakır Hafızası, and there the city memory, we're trying to keep it alive. We have digital exhibitions based on different themes. We covered the past, the cultural richness, the cultural diversity, the historic depth of the city, and we do this through the exhibition format. And we also have maps for memory. We have memory marches, but all these events are to display what was experienced in the city in the near or far past. We want to transfer this to the archives so that it serves academicians and researchers and those who are curious in the future. So we're trying to record the memory of the city as much as possible. I hope we can go on. Thank you for all your efforts. It's indeed a very important contribution for the field. We talked about the importance of telling because people talk about this traumatic past and it heals them and it makes them feel lighter. Eylem, I want to continue with you because we're now talking about oral history. You have important work in this area. My question is, when it comes to the face of practices, how does oral history serve that? And in rights-based struggle, in human rights, the advocacy, oral history is becoming more important. We used to look at data only in the past. Now we see more focus on human stories in rights advocacy. And there are some new trends, like together with digitalization, there is AI, the use of AI. So how do you see the work? Why is oral history important? Why is it important to listen and communicate? Well, this is a very big question. I hope I can answer this in a short period of time. Well, of course, in different parts of the world, we have colleagues working in the field of memory, and when we get together, we feel this a lot. This work in this geography, when we started here, we have a different type of burden. For instance, we talked about archive. I want to start from there before I answer your question. Archive is our biggest pain point. You know, if you accept archives as a political power, there is a question as to who has the power in their hands. When you want to carry out an oral history study about any subject, the first wall we hit is accessing the archives. So here, oral history work is not, it is preferred as a method, and there are several reasons for this in Turkey, but I think the most important one and the most lacking one in Turkey is that the work has not been processed and turned into an archive, really. So it's not just the researcher, but in the secondary research, there is some rich work that has been done, but they're not accessible. That is an issue. So there is a power in oral history, at least this is how I try to conduct my work. We call it oral history for historic justice, because in our country, in the legal sense, the trauma of the past, the confrontation with the past, all of these practices are not really put into effect. The legal process doesn't really function. In the search for rights, the perpetrators are not penalized in the legal platform. So the circles who are affected by this are searching for their rights. So the perpetrators, the crimes, the rights violations, oral history is an open and democratic platform to discuss those. So oral history is just the moment or format where you have this talk for most people. There is a narrator, there is a researcher, maybe there are a few narrators, there is a dialogue between them, and we listen to them. That's how it's seen. But in fact, it's more than that. Together with digitization, this is processed as research data. So oral history, contrary to qualitative or quantitative research, is a research method that provides a lot of content. There is a preliminary preparation, then there is the processing of data, there is analysis, it's open to the public sphere, it's open to the archive. It's a long and cumbersome process, and a lot of experts are involved in this process. So digitization is in the nature of oral history. In fact, technological developments are taking up an important place. It's an important step.
Of course, we had the invention of recording devices, then we were able to use TV, and visual records were available. Then internet became a part of our lives, making all these accessible online in the digital platform. So these are very important things. And looking at the past oral history work, we now have to focus on digitizing them and opening them up for the use of researchers. Of course, AI is going to be very important for us now, because you can immediately find among thousands and thousands of interviews exactly what the what concept you're looking for. Of course, to be able to do this, all the material has to be digitized, processed correctly, especially, and oral history as a research method has to be carried out in line with the ethical research methods. So we don't have a lot of teams that have been able to bring together both the technology and the ethical aspect of the issue. I hope in the future we will have more people working on such archives. We have been working on such an archive for the last 2 years, and hopefully, as you have done, we will be able to soon share it publicly on a digital platform. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing the results of your work. Aylin, let me turn to you as an artist and as a person analyzing sculptures. I would like to ask you the following. We have in Turkey many pieces of art that were removed, destroyed, disinstalled. Looking at the history of all these statues and sculptures and statues, especially Atatürk statues, how do you see it, and what do you think is the relation of the Turkish people with statues? Okay, first let me talk about the archive, and then Nayat, I will answer your question. Of course, the state is very destructive in terms of this. We have been witnessing all the destruction by the state, and in this neoliberal system we have the market relations based on capital and all these efforts trying to erase the past carelessly, and they're trying to erase our memory, and we also see an obstacle there, which is the archive. I'll give you an example, and then I'll link it to Atatürk statues. One of the most prominent items or objects of the state in Turkey has always been this. In every period, especially in the coup d'etat periods, the statues of Atatürk have been instrumentalized and been of great service. And with the coup d'etat, it became more and more important. So let's take a look at the inventory of such an important item or monument for the state. I tried to see the archives or the inventory of monuments in Turkey, and I was so surprised because it was not existing. I went to the General Directorate of Fine Arts. There was a very, very big monument that was written in the archives as Atatürk statue, although it was not Atatürk's statue, it was from some other president. But of course, they have to call everything as Atatürk statue. So, in many places we see the leader cult and this effort to write a glorious history. This is not only in Turkey, but in Turkey there is this conception or perception that whenever you say statue, it's always considered as Atatürk's statue. And then we have the shift in our aesthetics with transition of power to Islamic municipalities, but there was always this continuity in Atatürk's monuments. In nation-state understanding, we have this myths, iconography, in the establishment of all these things. War has always been an important thing that feeds it. Victory, for instance, especially starting from the 1980s, this was somehow changed. People started to see war as something that shouldn't be understood as sacred. So what they also started to see monuments as unsacred things. Only in Turkey we didn't have this. And only in Turkey we didn't see this change. We continue to repeat certain practices of the past, and these practices also create new traumas for people. So actually these public statues or sculptures are an extension of the public trauma. In Turkey we can't do it, as I said, because let's remember Roboski, what happened in Roboski. Uğur Kaymaz, for instance, his case. Let's remember. Let's remember Ali İsmail Korkmaz, what happened to him. So we have to create a new language in this country. We need to have a new sense of aesthetics in this country. Of course, in Turkey, the moment we say statue, immediately people think about Atatürk. So statues and sculptures are always associated with Atatürk only. We need to change this. I'll also give you an example about its relation with the society, and then I will stop. When that monument of humanity was constructed, they actually used a very wrong method. For instance, in an order that prevents talking about these things so much, we have seen this monument being prepared without consulting anyone. So the monument was symbolizing a topic that had never been talked about in the society, that was prevented to be talked about. So we had to have so many different stakeholders and parties to come together, consult with one another, and discuss all these issues. And that monument had to be erected as a result of a broad consensus and consultation. So the artist just went there, and I'm talking about the Monument of Humanity, and he built his sculpture or monument there without informing the public. So if you don't include the people, then people will not have ownership on the issue. Just like what happened in Roboski, the trustee would be appointed, and then people will not say anything, and then the issue is over. So when they were erecting that monument, they had to include all sections of society. Yes, it's very important. That's also something that really affects me a lot. All the spaces of memory have to be put in place by broad participation of stakeholders. All the people should come up with their ideas and suggestions and recommendations. And I also wish such efforts should not be imposed upon us, but I wish they are done with the participation of all people. One last question, and then we will conclude. As we're talking about Turkey, how do you think the memory work is going on in Turkey? Any inspiring work that you can think of from Turkey, and any issue that you think is not tackled by anyone? So, if you were to establish a place of memory or construct a monument, for instance, who would you dedicate it to? Maybe it's a difficult question, but let me ask you, and let's start with you if you wish. Well, first, I'm sure everyone would love to create their own place of memory according to themselves, the issue that is most dear to their hearts. But in societies like ours, I can say that I have so many things to talk about here, because we don't have only one single trauma or violence that we witnessed and faced. One after the other, we had Roboski. You can have a monument for Roboski, but then cities were distracted. We can have memories, places for all those cities, but it's not over. We still have a lot of ongoing violations of rights, painful experiences, and trauma is ongoing, so we should try to make sure that these are not forgotten, so we need to have monuments to make people remember these things. Then Turkey might turn into a monument, a cemetery of memory monuments, let's say, because we have so many things to remember in Turkey, so many pain and sorrow, so much pain and sorrow. So it started with the 1980 coup d'etat, and after the 1980s in the society, those who were involved in memory work in the society increased in number. We have academics at universities that work in this field. We have more archives. Of course, it's thanks to the technology. Now it's easier. And then civil society organizations most recently are doing this, especially until 2015, until the end of the peace process. We had a lot of activities in Turkey on these issues, both from the civil society, the academicians, universities, some scientific research work by academics, for instance. And we also see an increase in the government agencies in many cities. The municipalities are also carrying out city archive initiatives. But it's very difficult recording alternative facts, finding the truth, revealing the truth, going after truth is so difficult that despite all these difficulties, the first thing that comes to my mind, for instance, is Hrant Dink, a place of memory 23.5. It's an example in many dimensions. Again, the memory work of Hafıza Merkezi, the memory center, is really important, like a trailblazer. It's very informative for those of us working in the field of memory. And we have the ongoing regional efforts as well, like yours, and we have more smaller scale local initiatives like ours. But we do these because we believe we have to do it. Despite all the challenges, there are civil society organizations that carry out their work, but is this enough? No, we have so many shortcomings. In terms of technology, for instance, we don't know how to do what. We don't have the know-how. But then I believe that everyone should contribute in a smaller or bigger manner, regardless. And I'm sure in this country, one day, all the small pieces will come together and we will have a chance to talk about these things, hopefully. Unfortunately, I still say hopefully because we don't know, but only then we will be able to create ourselves a new world. Okay, I will wrap up very fast. Yes, there are so many diverse efforts and studies, and all of them are very valuable. But as far as I can observe, I can say that our traumatic past has the social dimension, which is not very much focused on. We have the perpetrators in power, and of course, the victim on the other side. And that tension between the two parties has to be relieved, and we need to. We have most of the work focusing on relieving the tension, but I also believe we should put a mirror out there for the society so that the society will look at that mirror and see itself, see its ugliness also. I hope in time we will have these efforts diversified. And one more thing that I identify as missing in the memory work is the following. Hafıza Merkezi 2 years ago had a wonderful work, but we need to do more. It's very important to keep the archive and also to draw more artists to the political arena. We need to help the artists get organized, just like that world of struggle before the 1980s. We need to make a call to them so that we can continue struggling all together. Well, I don't think I have much to say after Nevin, but really, if we were to try to draw the memory map of Turkey, we would see that there are so many themes that are missing, that we are not working on. There are so many topics that we can work on, and when it's over, just like Marxist historians in UK, we can start discussing those topics. So I mainly work on coup d'etat issues, and I think there is a lack of work on this area. All people immediately think about the 1980 coup d'etat, or the most recent one, but this is true for all the coup d'etat that we have had throughout the history in our country. And just like Aylin has said, witnessing these things and witnessing such traumatic processes and transferring memory between the generations is something that is important to understand. One final thing, I really think the series of the Speak Up series by the Hrant Dink Foundation is very important because it's an important piece of memory work, not only because it is there, but it also shows us where denial fits in one's life. Yes, even the fact that we are able to gather here today to talk about this topic is very important, because as a counter effort we are able to do this. So I think the work of Hrant Dink Foundation is very important, and the examples given by my colleagues, my fellow panelists, are also very good. So during the pandemic, we had the Parasilia Collective, established by different Armenian women from different places. So I want to talk about this example because I believe that we are concerned about giving a voice to the voiceless and creating a new language. That's important for us, just like the examples you have given. As much as what we remember, how we remember it is important. So it's not about transferring trauma by regenerating it, but we should continue by working together, acting together, thinking together. And it's very important but difficult at the same time. That's why any effort shown in that regard is very important, very valuable, and I'm very happy to be able to be here to talk about these issues today. Thank you. Thank you indeed for listening to us. We don't have any more time for questions in this session, but we will be around. If you want to ask any questions, you can find us. We would like to thank you all personally for all the work you have carried out on behalf of my institution as well. You have very important work that will have transformative power, not in the short run maybe, that's not the expectation, but in the long run, I really believe that your work makes contribution to social peace. Thank you. We would like to thank everyone for their participation. Before you leave, we will kindly ask you to fill in the evaluation form. You will see the QR code on the screen in a while. Please scan that on your mobile phones and fill in the evaluation form, because your thoughts matter for us. Next panel will start at 1 o'clock. If you wish, until 1 o'clock, you may visit the booths outside in the terrace, and food